Do you think it was wrong for you to be silent?
Senator, I didn't know anything about
Why
it.
didn't you? Didn't you have a moral obligation to know about a center that you sat on the board of for years, whose director was calling Jewish people colonialist, violent settlers? Do you not have a moral obligation to know and say something?
That is not the function of an academic advisory board, but I abhor
But it
any
is the function of
anti-Semitism.
a responsible jurist and a responsible citizen. And I would just suggest to you that you failed it. And your inability to just say, this was wrong, this shouldn't have been said, this kind of language and rhetoric is what has led directly to Jewish American students now being called out on campuses, in classrooms, told to stand up and go and stand in a corner because they need to feel what it's like to be colonized. I'm sure you've seen the reports of this happening across the country. This is happening now.
Senator, your time's expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to the nominees. Mr. Long, I didn't understand your answer to Senator Blackburn, so I just wanted to come back to that for a second, if I could. She asked you if you participated in any meetings at all related to the Hunter Biden laptop. Was that a yes or a no?
Senator, as a Department of Justice employee bound by Section 1-7 of the Justice Manual, as well as a judicial nominee, it's not appropriate for me, and I'm bound not to talk about.
Why isn't it appropriate for you? As a judicial nominee? Does this have anything to do with any case that you have, right? I'm asking you what you did in your former employment as the Deputy Chief of Staff to the FBI Director. Did you participate in any meetings related to the Hunter Biden laptop?
Senator, again, as a Department of Justice employee.
It sounds like you're not going to answer me. Is this going to be a I'm not going to answer you type deal?
Senator, I'm bound to follow the Code of Judicial Conduct.
The Code of Judicial Conduct doesn't have any bearing on this question whatsoever. What possible bearing could it have? That's a question mark.
Well, Senator, as the Code of Judicial Conduct requires integrity and independence in the judiciary, it requires judicial officers to act with...
It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card when you don't want to answer questions when you're under oath before a committee who's considering you for a lifetime appointment to the federal bench. I'm going to try one last time. Did you participate in any meetings during your time as Deputy Chief of Staff or Acting Chief of Staff related to the Hunter Biden laptop, yes or no?
Senator, again, I'm not permitted to answer.
Oh, you are permitted to answer. You don't want to answer because it would be inconvenient for you. And I have to tell you, I find that extremely troubling, Mr. Long, extremely troubling. Not a good start. Let's see if we can do better on a different topic. While you were at the Department of Justice, or at the FBI in your capacity as Deputy Chief of Staff and Acting Chief of Staff, did you ever observe FBI resources being used to monitor pro-life groups or pro-life individuals?
No, Senator, I don't have any information about that.
What about Catholic parishes or Catholic groups?
No, Senator.
So, now, I notice you're happy to answer those questions, but you're not happy to answer the Hunter Biden question. They're not qualitatively different. I'd just like to note that for the record. You familiar with this memo generated by the FBI field office in January of 2023 regarding the infiltration of Catholic parishes by the FBI? I'm sure you've seen this in the news.
I've not seen that memo, but I've seen news reports relating to that memo.
Well, let me tell you what's in the memo. In the memo, the FBI field office in Richmond recommends infiltrating Catholic parishes that it deems traditionalists associated with the Latin Mass, recruiting FBI informants within those parishes to monitor speech within the parishes. The House Judiciary Committee has later learned, this is in a letter dated April 10th, 2023, that the FBI relied on at least one undercover agent to produce its analysis in this memo, and the FBI has proposed that its agents engage in outreach to Catholic parishes to develop sources among the clergy. Did any of this occur while you were at the FBI?
Senator, I've not been at the FBI in over 2 years.
That's not my question. Did any of this occur while you were at the FBI? Did you see anything like this happening while you were at the FBI?
I did not, Senator.
Do you think it's appropriate?
Senator, I haven't worked at the FBI in
I'm not asking you that.
years.
I'm asking you, do you think this is appropriate? Do you think it's appropriate to recruit informants in Catholic parishes?
Senator, I don't know the circumstances underlying that memo. I have not reviewed that memo. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment on it.
It's not appropriate for you to comment on whether or not the federal government of the United States should be infiltrating religious entities and organizations and trying to recruit informants and sources in the clergy? You don't have an opinion on that? You want a lifetime federal appointment to the judiciary to conduct impartial justice, but you can't say that this is inappropriate? You know, let me give you a refresher course. The Attorney General of the United States sat right where you were sitting, and he couldn't run away fast enough from this. He said it was a gross abuse of department authority. He claimed that it had never happened. He was not telling the truth, it turns out. But he said that if it was happening, he put a stop to it immediately, because it was grossly inconsistent with the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. Can you say that?
Senator, that wasn't that memo and the conduct that it relates to wasn't anything that I would have discussed.
I'm not asking you that. I'm asking you whether or not you can say as a jurist, as a lawyer, as a member of the bar, as an American, whether this is appropriate to be recruiting informants in Catholic churches, to be using federal government resources to go after clergy in Catholic churches, to be designating and treating members of Catholic parishes as terrorists. Is that appropriate or not?
Senator, again, based upon my experience at the FBI, this was not something that we ever discussed. This was not, I've never seen that memo before. It would not be appropriate for me to comment.
I cannot believe your answers. I cannot believe that I can't believe anybody who would come before this committee would look at this and look at what they have tried to do and just listen to the Attorney General, for heaven's sake, and would not say it's grossly inappropriate, this should never happen. I'm absolutely stunned by this. And for that reason, among others, I cannot support your nomination. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to the nominees. Thanks for being here. Judge Kill, let me just start with you. You're involved, I think, with a group called the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. Have I got that right?
I did a couple cases with them, Senator. It's probably been 15 years at least since I did any work with them.
Okay, fair enough. Have you done some fundraising for them? Do I understand that correctly, or am I misinformed?
I don't believe I've ever done any fundraising for them.
Well, let me just ask you about, I'm curious because of some things they've said recently, so just let me ask you about this and you can give me your viewpoint on it. Earlier this month, right after the attacks on Israel, the AALDEF said that it stands in solidarity with Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim communities, and went on to help push out on social media a toolkit, that's their word, for student protesters that we've seen on our campuses, including resources, talking points, and chants for students who are pressing to end the genocide in Gaza, which of course we've seen invoked by those who are calling for the destruction of the state of Israel. So let me just give you a chance to respond to that. What's your view on that? How do you read this? I mean, how do you read this statement from this group? Just let me give you the opportunity to respond to that. How about that?
Senator, I have not had any involvement with the group for a very, very long time, and my only involvement was representing restaurant workers and wage and hour claims. I'm not familiar with that statement from ALDEF, so I'm not sure that I could comment on that.
Fair enough. Let me just ask you, I assume that doesn't represent your views, your personal views, the position that the group has taken here with regard to the attacks on Israel?
As I said, Senator, I'm not sure in what context or what that statement was. I haven't read the full statement, so I can't really tell you whether
Well, how about this? Why don't I give you an open-ended chance to say, with regard to the attacks on Israel, the threats on Jewish Americans, what we're seeing on our college campuses, where we have some student groups out there saying, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be free, which of course is a call for the elimination of the state of Israel. Why don't you just tell us what your views are on that?
Senator, it's a very complicated issue. I haven't really studied it. It is a terrible situation, what is going on there. And Senator, that's all I can really say what my personal views are.
Well, let me put it to you this way, would you condemn those who are calling for who say things like from the river to the sea, which is a call for the elimination of the state of Israel and frankly, the killing of Jews in the Middle East. I mean, would you condemn that?
Senator, as I said, I know it's a very complicated situation. It's a tragic situation. I haven't studied the situation. I don't know how I can answer that today, Senator. Because
go ahead.
As a judge and the role that I would be playing, my personal views of things would not come into consideration, certainly, Senator. And I would keep an open mind for all matters that come before me. And that's the way that I would approach the job of a judge.
I totally understand that, and I'm not asking you to comment on any case. I just am trying to. I wanted to give you a chance to respond to this group statement, but let me just see if I can get you to understand your views here. Just with regard to the attacks on Israel and the violence in this country against Jewish Americans, you condemn all of that. You have no truck with that. You would say that we should condemn all of that explicitly, I assume, right? I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I mean, you tell me.
Yes, Senator. Any violence here in this country against Jewish people should be condemned.
Okay, and these protests that we've seen where people are explicitly calling for the elimination of the state of Israel. We had Jewish students at Cooper Union in New York who were barricaded inside a library for hours while pro-Hamas protesters banged on the doors, shouted at them, screamed at them. You condemn all of that, I assume.
I'm not familiar with that situation, Senator. I know nothing about it.
Are you familiar with the campus protests that have happened all across the country? The Senate's addressed this in a resolution that passed unanimously condemning that rhetoric of genocide, frankly, against the Jews. I'm just trying to get you to say, I hope, that you condemn that, you think that's wrong, you're against it.
100%, Senator. I would condemn the genocide of Jewish people.
Okay. Yeah. Mr. Fonzone, let me very quickly, because I'm almost out of time now, and there are lots of other senators who want to ask you questions, but I just want to ask you quickly about some work, and we follow up in written questions, but some work you've done for the People's Republic of China, different entities. You did some work for Huawei, I think, in 2018, for the Ministry of Commerce of the Chinese government, and then for the Hong Kong Trade Development Council, if I'm not mistaken, in 2019 and 2020, another governmental entity. That was right during the Hong Kong protests. My question to you is, and I'll give you some more for the record, but my question for you is, did you advise that council during that time of the Hong Kong protests on messaging, on what was happening there? I mean, tell us about your work.
No, Senator, thank you for the question. I know this is an issue of interest to the Senate. It came up in my last confirmation process as well. I think in general, my practice in private practice was focused on advising companies on American law and how American law worked. For the three entities you just mentioned, I did a small amount of work at the request of other partners, much of it many years ago. None of that work has affected my ability to give objective advice in my current role at the Office of Director of National Intelligence, and none of it would if I was fortunate enough to be confirmed at OLC.
This is my last thing, Mr. Chairman. Just last question. But did you in 2019, 2020, at the height of those protests in Hong Kong, which the government brutally repressed, I saw it with my own eyes, did you give the Trade Council any kind of advice involving issues related to those protests?
No, the advice, and I obviously can't get into privileged information, but the advice we gave was, the work I did was basically on advising them on issues related to my practice, which is around privacy and cybersecurity.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Congratulations to all the nominees. Thank you for being here. Congratulations to your families. Mr. Sheriff, if I could just start with you, I wanted to follow up on a question or two that Senator Kennedy asked you, because I wasn't sure that I understood your answers, but I bet you can clear it up for me. Let me just come back to questions he asked you related to your membership in the ACLU in the Southern California chapter. I think we've established that you're a member there. You said you contribute $120 a year. Fine. I just want to go back to these various statements that chapter has made, and my question is not, why did they make the statements? I'm sure that we can look up what the ACLU of Southern California said in which context. I just want to know your own views on it. I'm trying to figure out, do they speak for you on these matters? That's what I'm trying to ascertain here. So here, let's try this again. They have written, the ACLU of Southern California, that that U.S. policing has historical roots in slave patrols and in the forced dislocation of indigenous youth. Now, that's a pretty strong statement. I just want to know, does that represent your viewpoint?
Senator, I do not have knowledge or background in terms of the origins, and I don't know what they were referring to there. I can speak to my experience with federal law enforcement, and I have tremendous respect and have worked closely, respect for, and have worked closely with federal law enforcement who I believe uphold the rule of law and serve the public interest every day.
Well, so are you telling me you think that U.S. policing, the U.S. police forces, I think the first standing U.S. police force was in my state, I think it was in the city of St. Louis. Are you saying that you think they might have historical roots in slave patrols?
That I don't know. I know the U.S. Marshal Service likes to state that they're the first federal law enforcement agency founded in the initial Judiciary Act.
My question is, do you think that U.S. policing has historical roots in slave patrols?
I'm not aware of that, Senator.
You don't think that it does? What about this? The same letter says that the presence of police has devastating and discriminatory impacts on tens of thousands of California students. Do you agree with that?
Senator, I don't know the context in which what that's specifically describing or talking about.
But in your own experience, I mean, are they speaking for you here? Do you agree with that?
In my experience, in Fresno, in the Fresno division of the Eastern District of California, on balance, I believe that the police, including the police departments, which our office works with closely, and certainly federal and state and local law enforcement, are a positive influence.
Okay, good. Let's talk about ICE for a second, because I know you testified that you've worked with ICE. So the same chapter of the ACLU that you're a member of has said that ICE is not welcome here. They've gone on to say, as part of a package that they devised for children, they released door hangers, posters, and coloring sheets for children that included guidelines for how to use them. The guidelines said ICE agents resort to trickery and deception. Do you agree with that? Has that been your experience, that ICE agents resort to trickery and deception?
My experience, Senator, is with working with ICE agents on cases under 8 U.S.C. 1326 and other related criminal immigration cases, and I have found them to be diligent, hardworking, and ethical law enforcement officers.
Okay, good. So I think we've established that the ACLU of Southern California, at least as to these statements, they don't speak for you. I mean, you have the views that you've just articulated.
My views are not I'm not familiar with all of the ACLU's views, but certainly I have independent views.
Okay, good. Let me just ask you about this. You've also been a frequent contributor to the group Act Blue. This is a group that, as my colleagues on this panel have emphasized of late, have supported fundraisers with the theme "All Cops Are Bastards." Have you contributed to any of those fundraisers through Act Blue? All Cops Are Bastards fundraisers?
No, Senator.
And does that represent your view or experience with law enforcement?
That does not represent my view of law enforcement.
Okay. I think that those are helpful answers. I think we maybe could have gotten there a little bit earlier with my colleagues, but I'm glad to hear you distance yourself, frankly, from these statements, because I think those statements are pretty outrageous. And it concerns me a little bit that you're a member of a chapter that regularly, and we're not talking about one thing, we're talking about multiple letters, multiple projects, multiple issues over years from this particular chapter. But I'm gratified to hear you say that they do not represent you on these matters. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to the nominees. Thanks for being here. Mr. Mungy, if I could just start with you, I just want to make sure I understood your answers to my colleagues, including Senator Cruz. Let me just read you something. I just want to know if you agree with this or not. This should be simple. Here's a statement. The demand to center Israel's right to self-defense, that's in scare quotes, self-defense, erases the colonial context and delegitimizes the Palestinian right to resistance. We are in awe of the Palestinian struggle to resist violent occupation, removal, erasure, and the expansion of Israeli settler colonialism. Do you agree with that, yes or no? I realize you didn't write it, and you may not know who the author is, may never have heard of these people before. I just want to know, does this represent your view, yes or no?
Senator, any attempt to justify what happened on October 7th, I have absolutely no...
Well, that's not the context here. This is talking about any discussion of Israel's right to self-defense erases the colonial context. It's calling Israel a colonial state. So could we just answer my question? Do you agree with this, yes or no?
Senator, I don't claim to be an expert on the Middle East. I don't have the historic or regional
That
expertise.
sounds like a maybe. That's a maybe? Maybe you agree? Can
No.
we get a yes or a no?
Each say this is a policy question or a question for foreign experts.
That's what I don't understand. By the way, this was written by the director of the center you sat on the board of, that you advised. This is the director, not some random professor, the director, who published it in an open letter. So when you say it's a policy, what's the policy about calling Israel a violent settler colonialist state? Why is that a policy question?
Senator, that is not a statement that I had any involvement with.
Okay, good. So would you condemn it then? You say this does not represent your views.
Senator, I have no basis as a judicial nominee to cast views on the Middle East or what does or does not happen
This
there.
is what you're not answering my question. I'm asking you whether this individual who said that Israel was a violent settler colonial state, I'm just trying to get you to say, do you agree with that or not? And I've asked you now 4 different times, 4 different ways. You're not answering me. Why is that? Why can't you just say, no, I don't agree with this? Let's try again.
Yeah.
Do you agree with this statement, yes or no?
Senator, in order to agree or disagree with any statement, I need to have a sufficient factual background to assess it.
So in other words, you can't say whether or not Israel is a violent colonial state. You think that's a difficult question?
God.
That is not an issue with which I have any expertise.
Is the Holocaust also a difficult question? Does that need context?
No.
Is that a policy question?
I am quite happy to address the Holocaust, Senator.
Why aren't you happy to address this then? Why is it that an individual in the center that you directed who calls Israel a violent colonialist state, those are racist comments, why can't you condemn that? I don't understand it. You won't answer my questions, you won't answer Senator Cruz's questions, you wouldn't answer Senator Kennedy's questions. I don't understand why this is complicated.
Senator, I'm Pakistani. I didn't grow up in the Middle East.
I didn't either. I didn't either, but that doesn't mean that I can't say that somebody who says that a Jewish state is a violent colonialist enterprise is wrong. This isn't a policy question, it's a moral question. This is a moral issue.
Senator, I am not in a position to make any policy pronouncements about actions in the Middle East.
Does Israel have a right to exist?
Yes.
Should American Jews be safe in their homes and on their campuses?
Senator, there is
Just
no
yes
one.
or no, please. Spare me the lectures. Yes or no. Did you advise against this letter? You sat on the advisory board. Did you advise against it?
I never even heard of that letter.
How is that possible? What did you do on this board for all these years? This was years before you left it.
It's an advisory board that met once a year to talk about academic research.
Do you not think it's relevant to the setting in the academy that Jewish students might feel unsafe when they have a tenured professor who's the director of a center saying that Israel is a violent colonialist state? Do you think that may not have an effect on the educational environment?
Senator, I abhor.
But you didn't care to look into it?
May I respond?
But I've heard your answers, and they're all move over here, look over here. You're not answering any of my questions. And I can't figure out why. I can't figure out why you won't just say that this was wrong. So you didn't advise against it. You didn't condemn it. You didn't look into the center's activities. Do you regret that? Do you regret not at the time taking a moral stand against these frankly racist condemnations of Jewish Americans, Jewish people in the state of Israel? Do you think it was wrong for you to be silent?
Senator, I didn't know anything about
Why
it.
didn't you? Didn't you have a moral obligation to know about a center that you sat on the board of for years, whose director was calling Jewish people colonialist, violent settlers? Do you not have a moral obligation to know and say something?
That is not the function of an academic advisory board. but I abhor
But it
any
is the function of
anti-Semitism.
a responsible jurist and a responsible citizen. And I would just suggest to you that you failed it. And your inability to just say, this was wrong, this shouldn't have been said, this kind of language and rhetoric is what has led directly to Jewish American students now being called out on campuses, in classrooms, told to stand up and go and stand in a corner because they need to feel what it's like to be colonized. I'm sure you've seen the reports of this happening across the country. This is happening now.
Senator, your time's expired. Mr. Manji, would you like to complete an answer?
Thank you, Chair Durbin. Any acts of anti-Semitism or any bigotry, including anti-Muslim bigotry, on college campuses is abhorrent. My children will be going to university soon. I want them to feel safe, and I want the children of my Jewish friends and colleagues to feel safe too.
Well, you think you'll take a greater interest when your children are on campus, maybe, than you did for the last 3 years?
Senator, your time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to all of the nominees. Thank you all for being here. Judge Bezos, if I could just start with you. I want to ask you about this case, United States versus Bartunik, I think it is, from 2017. Do you remember this case?
I do.
This is a case in which you granted pretrial release to the defendant. It was a child pornography case. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Now, you said in your responses to the panel's questions that the defendant had no criminal convictions and had lived in Nebraska his entire life, and that he owned the home he was living in and was employed. I understand, however, at the time that you granted him release, the Omaha Police Department had an open investigation regarding the sexual assault of a 7-year-old child in which he was the subject. He was the suspect, and that was in the pre-sentence report. So just walk me through your thinking.
During the hearing, I asked for additional information from the government, and they couldn't give it to me, so we didn't have a lot of facts in regards to that. The facts and circumstances, there was no additional information that was provided to me at that time.
So you didn't know he was the subject of the investigation?
There may have been a mention, but the question I had was, well, what does that mean? Has there been a report made? Is he truly the suspect, or was his name just mentioned? What were the circumstances? And at that point in time, there was no additional information that could be given.
I see. So it looks like to me what was, according to the revised PSR, the Omaha Police Department has an open investigation regarding the sexual assault of a 7-year-old child, who's then identified with initials, in which the defendant is the subject. But you're saying that you thought that was not sufficient in order to guide your judgment?
Was that the pre-sentence report, which would happen after sentencing, versus the pretrial report, which is what I would get prior to bond setting?
Offers the following objections to the revised PSR. The defendant objects to the inclusion of any reference, and then it goes on to quote this material about the sexual assault. So you're saying you didn't have that information?
Correct. That would have been after sentencing.
Okay, so you weren't aware that...
At sentencing, prior to sentencing, after a plea, is when that information would...
Okay, so when you granted pretrial release, you were not aware that he was under investigation for the assault of a 7-year-old?
Based on what you're saying in that PSR, then no.
Well, I'm asking, is your memory any different? I mean, I can give these questions to you for the record if that would be more helpful. I just want to clarify the facts because I just want to make sure. If you're telling me you didn't know about it, that's a very different thing.
Well, I don't believe I did.
Okay.
But
okay. I tell you what, I'll give you some questions for the record on this, and that way, so that you don't have to just rely on your memory.
and I can go back and look at the pre-sentence report.
That'd be great.
Or
That
the
would be great.
pretrial report, which would tell me that.
Great, fair enough, thank you. Judge Merriweather, let me just ask you in my short remaining time here, I think Senator Kennedy was asking you about this case, United States versus Johnson, where you recommended the release of a sexual predator to get medical treatment. Is that right? Do I have the right case?
Senator, I recommended a 21-day a temporary release for medical treatment after holding multiple hearings and giving the government multiple opportunities to get Mr. Johnston to his appointments, because as I noted in the opinion, I thought the charges were deeply disturbing. I take very seriously the danger to the community, and I found when I balanced the 4 factors that I had to consider under the Bail Reform Act, that it was only his history and characteristics, which was that at the time that issue was before me, he had an urgent need for diagnostic and treatment, cancer treatment,
Let me just say, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm almost out of time. I just want to make sure I understand the sequence, because I might, as to my questions to Judge Bezos, I might not have the sequencing right. So just, you can correct me here. So I thought the government filed an emergency appeal of your release order, and you were overturned by the D.C. District Judge because, for among other reasons, the predator here had been caught in a sting operation. He'd admitted to sexually abusing his 8-year-old daughter. He had been previously court-martialed for molesting a child when he was in the Air Force. That child was his adopted daughter, and he claimed to have sexually molested other children, and the government thought that releasing him was a terrible idea. The district court agreed with him. Agreed with the government. So I just wonder, in light of all of that, as you look back on it now, do you think it was a bad decision to recommend release for him?
2 things. First, all of the abuse that it was alleged was horrific. The charges that were in front of me did not involve the molestation of his daughter, which I believe had happened 15 years earlier. And my decision was not based solely on the nature of the charges. That's but one of 4 factors that the Bail Reform Act required me to consider. The factual predicate, as I highlighted in that opinion, I found it very challenging to even entertain the idea of releasing someone charged with such heinous crimes, as well as someone who had a history decades earlier of abuse. But I found that his own interest in self-preservation would, paired with stringent conditions, being under the custody of his wife for a limited period of time and only allowed to leave his home to go to the doctor in order to get the timely cancer treatment that he needed, that despite 3 opportunities he was unable to get through no intent, malicious intent of the government.
Can I just ask, this is it, Mr. Chairman, this is my last question. Can I just ask, I thought that he was getting cancer treatment, but your judgment was he wasn't getting enough or the right kind, but he was getting treatment. Is that not accurate?
No, that was the change between my ruling and the time of the reversal. I gave the government 3 opportunities to take him to the doctor, and I kept him detained despite it. He did not get to the doctor. I ordered him temporarily released so that he could see a cancer specialist, because cancer is a time-sensitive issue, as many of us know, with loved ones who are survivors of cancer. And then the next day, he got to the doctor. Had he been to the doctor, I would not have released him for 21 days. I didn't feel that he needed a specific doctor, which was the facts that were presented to the district judge. It was that he see any doctor so that he could timely have his cancer addressed. Unfortunately, that did not happen before he saw me, so I made the very difficult decision of ordering temporary release under stringent conditions so that could happen. It then happened, and so the need for it no longer existed. Had he seen the doctor before I ruled, I would have denied his motion, and I would have ordered that he remain detained.
Thank you for that explanation, Judge. I just note here in the notes, when you disclosed this case, which you did, to the committee, you said a significant factor in my ruling was that jail officials had repeatedly failed to transport the defendant to medical appointments, and he had a private physician who could promptly conduct testing and treatment. You did not release him using that word in its entirety, but it was for home treatment, home incarceration for this period of time. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Senator.
Thank you very much. I believe that's all of the senators who are going to be attending this hearing, and I want to thank all the nominees and their family and friends for their patience during this. One quick logistical note, questions for the record. will be due to the nominees by 5 p.m. on Wednesday, January 31st, and the record will likewise remain open until that time to submit letters and similar materials. With that, the hearing is adjourned.
My father, a German immigrant, but that seeking justice here, has your work in the MacArthur Foundation informed your feelings about that value?
Senator, I've been very privileged in my career to represent large corporations in private practice and to represent some of the most needy folks in the United States. And I've had the incredible privilege of arguing before the United States Supreme Court. And I actually walked past the court this morning. And every time I do go there to argue, I look up on my way in and see those 4 words, equal justice under law. That has greatly informed my thinking. That said, I understand and appreciate, because of the profound respect I have for our Constitution, the very different role that I would be called upon to have if confirmed as a federal district court judge.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hawley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to all the nominees. Thank you for being here. Mr. Ali, if I could just come back to you, I want to follow up on what Senator Graham was asking, because I didn't hear all of your answers. I just want to make sure that I understand where you are on these issues. So just to set the table here, you're the president and executive director of the MacArthur Justice Center. Is that correct?
Senator, that's correct. I have one other disclosure for you, which is that I'm also a 49ers fan.
Oh,
and
no.
So I'm just
Starting
apologizing in
quickly.
advance for what Christian McCaffrey and and Deebo Samuel will
Trash
unleash
talk.
on your
Oh, my
Chiefs
gosh.
this Sunday.
Oh, my gosh. Here we go. All right. I'll come back to that. So let's just clarify some things you said to Senator Graham. So your organization, the MacArthur Justice Center, has expressed support in the past for the defund the police movement. I'm looking here at public statements, public comments that the organization has made, calling for defunding the police, hashtag defund the police. Here's one. Here's the second one. I know you're familiar with these. And I thought I heard you say to Senator Graham that you disagree with this, that you do not support defund the police. I just want to make sure I got that right.
Senator, that's right. I have never taken that position, nor would I, for any number of reasons. One of which I'd like to say is that I work closely with law enforcement on these issues of accountability, public safety, and confidence in law enforcement.
Okay, good. So to the extent that the center has in the past taken this position, that does not reflect your views and doesn't reflect your leadership. Is that fair to say?
That's right. So much so that I looked into that and tried to figure out how that hashtag, I understand there was an article describing 2 tweets that had been made, looked into that, and I'm still to this day puzzled how that happened. But they were before my time as executive director.
Well, you say puzzled why the center expressed those views? Is that what you're saying?
To my knowledge, the center itself has never taken the position of defund the police.
Okay, and you disagree with that position. You disagree with the defund the police position. Okay, let me ask you about something else I think Senator Graham was touching on. My understanding is that the MacArthur Center asked the Chicago State Attorney's Office to dismiss all the charges against rioters following the BLM riots in the summer of 2020. Do I have that right? And if so, do you agree with that?
Senator, my understanding of that circumstance is that the attorneys in that office, I wasn't a part of that office at the time, represented individuals who were peaceful protesters and represented community groups. And so that letter took place in the course of advocacy that I wasn't personally involved in, so I'm not intimately familiar with the fact.
Okay, you would not support, though, dismissing charges against rioters who committed acts of vandalism, violence, etc., as a general matter?
Senator, I believe that people who are a risk to public safety need to be accountable and need to be held pending those charges if they're a risk to public safety. And I understand the law to require that.
Let me ask you, since you said pending, my understanding is the MacArthur Center also opposes pretrial detention. Is that right?
Senator, so let me be very clear. I believe that if somebody is a risk to public safety, they should be held. And federal law requires that. The Bail Reform Act requires that, in addition to some other considerations. And if confirmed to be a federal district court judge, I would apply that law without reservation.
So
Why?
I got you. So just the center, though, am I wrong? They don't oppose. Your center does not oppose pretrial detention. Am I wrong about that?
Senator, there's no categorical opposition to pretrial detention, as I understand it. The United States Supreme Court has been very clear that someone cannot be detained solely on account of their poverty. But to my knowledge, the Justice Center's position has been that if someone is found to be a risk to public safety, then detention is warranted under the law.
And what about the use of electronic monitoring of defendants? Does the MacArthur Center oppose that?
Senator, again, my understanding of federal law is that the supervised release provision.
Well, but I'm asking you about the center, though. I'm familiar with federal law, but the center that you're the executive director of, I just want to clarify. I want to make sure I understand what your positions are.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Senator. So I haven't personally worked on a case involving electronic monitoring. I can tell you that the center is not a policy organization. We don't have a single employee in our organization who takes policies. All of our work is grounded in litigation, in a client.
Okay, let me ask you, I don't mean to interrupt you. I mean, I do mean to interrupt you, but I don't mean to be rude about it. I'm almost out of time. Let me just ask you this. The director, as I understand it, of your Illinois office referred to electronic monitoring as replacing one form of incarceration with another. Does that reflect your views or the views of your organization? How about, does it reflect your views? Let's just get to that.
Senator, I'm not sure I fully understand what that would mean under federal law. I can tell you that the Bail Reform Act, the Sentencing Reform Act, and the supervised release provision require supervision in certain circumstances, first and foremost, when there is a risk to public safety and a need to protect the public.
Well, my time's expired, and I know that there are other colleagues here who want to ask you questions. I appreciate your answers. This is helpful. My concern has been that the center that you're the executive director of seems to take positions to me that seem, frankly, a little extreme. So maybe those aren't your positions. I'll give you some more questions for the record. I was so nice to you, even though you're a 49ers fan. It's horrible. But the Chiefs, I know I was really nice. The Chiefs are going to win by 10, at least. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'll watch together.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to the nominees. Thank you for being here. Congratulations to your families. Ms. Sugnanan, if I could start with you. I think we've established from the recent lines of questioning that you worked at Jones Day. You were a partner at Jones Day, is that right?
That's correct, Senator.
And how long were you at Jones Day, out of curiosity?
I was at the firm for 6 years, Senator.
Okay. You had a series of clients in that time, I imagine. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
That included a series of hedge funds, global hedge funds, is that right?
Yes, Senator.
Funds like Altair Global, Claren Road Asset Management, Glendon Capital Management, Nakota Capital, Oak Tree Capital Management, Oker Rose, and Centerbridge Partners. Does that sound right?
That sounds right.
And you represented these hedge funds in particular during a debt crisis that Puerto Rico had in 2017. Do you remember that?
Yes, Senator.
So Puerto Rico had a debt crisis in 2017. Your clients had bought a series of bonds and held quite a lot of money in bonds, if I'm correct. And it's $1.4 billion. Does that sound right?
Yes, Senator.
Of course, other people had bought bonds too. Normal people, everyday people had bought bonds. And when the debt crisis kicked off, the courts froze all of the assets, all of Puerto Rico's assets, to make sure that everybody got their fair share and was paid out in accordance with the law, and that normal people who bought bonds would get their fair share, right? I mean, I've got it right so far?
Yes, Senator.
So you, however, on behalf of your clients, you invented a novel claim. You filed a lawsuit under the takings clause. Is that right?
That's correct, Senator.
So you argued that the government was stealing from the hedge funds by freezing all of the funds, and if they pursued that course of action and didn't give your clients all of their money first, then they would have violated the U.S. Constitution. Is that right?
That's not quite correct, Senator.
Why was it a good idea? Why represent all of these hedge funds trying to get billions of dollars out of Puerto Rico when other everyday bondholders are left to pick up the slack? You dragged this thing out for years. I mean, you went back and forth to the circuit court. Other hedge funds then followed your lead. They thought that was terrific arguments, super inventive. So then they did the same thing. So then other hedge funds piled in. The bankruptcy went on and on. Puerto Rico was forced to institute serious austerity measures, much to the detriment of their citizens, average people who don't have money for hedge funds. Why is it a good idea to go to Puerto Rico and to try to get your rich clients prioritized over normal people in a way that seriously impoverished, if I might say, the citizens of the island?
Senator, the legal profession is bound by a code of ethics that I think is incredibly important and that I am proud to adhere to in every case. My clients in that case...
Take from the rich or take from the poor to give to the rich? Is that the code of ethics?
Senator, Jones Day was retained in that case to represent a group of clients. Along with my colleagues, I made the best possible arguments.
Well, wait. Are you saying it wasn't voluntary? You represented them, right? You were lead counsel, I thought. Were you lead counsel?
Senator, I was not lead counsel. I was one of many lawyers who handled that litigation.
And it was involuntary? You were assigned, or you chose to do it? You did it voluntarily, didn't you?
Senator, those hedge funds were a client of the firm. I was asked to join the team and work on that matter.
Which you did. Okay. My question is why? Why is that? Why is it a good idea? I mean, you can say no.
Senator, my colleagues and I at Jones Day in that case made the best possible argument.
Well, I know, and I listen. I don't doubt. I'm not questioning your talent. I understand why they wanted to hire you. Your talent's considerable. I'm just wondering why you thought it was important to deploy it on behalf of these hedge funds to the detriment of everyday citizens who were bearing the cost. And you invented it was very novel. Listen, I give you credit. And everybody else thought so too. That's why all the other rich players got in and said, we want to do that, and drug it out for years. I'm just wondering why you thought that was a good idea.
Senator, Jones Day was retained to represent
I heard that the
those
first
clients.
time. I'm just wondering why you thought it was a good idea. You could use your considerable talents in any number of cases, ways, means, and methods. You could have said no to representing these clients. You didn't, obviously. In fact, you vigorously defended them to the point of inventing this novel theory, which was quite successful for your very lucrative clients. I'm just wondering why.
Senator, I have represented a number of clients over the course of my career. I have represented the government. I have represented clients.
So you don't have any problem with this? You think this is a good idea? You stand by it?
Senator,
No
my
regrets?
job in that representation was to vigorously represent my clients, which I did.
Sure, but we'd established, I think, a second ago, I thought you told Senator Kennedy that you resigned from Jones Day over a client that the firm was representing who you didn't like.
Senator, that is not at all what I said.
You didn't resign from Jones Day?
Senator, I did not resign from Jones Day because of any particular representation.
So it wasn't a moral, you had no moral quandaries?
Absolutely not, Senator.
You had no moral quandaries with any of the cases at Jones Day? That's your testimony?
Senator, I left the firm in January of 2021 because I was offered an opportunity to return to public service. It's an opportunity the firm supported and that I took.
You had no quandaries with them representing in the Trump litigation? You had
Senator,
no problem with that? That's your testimony?
Senator, I did not leave my firm because of that representation.
You had
I
no
left
moral
my
problem with
firm.
it.
Senator, I left the firm months later because I received an opportunity to return
to public service. You had no problem with that,
service.
and you had no problem representing the bondholders. So your testimony is you're happy to represent anybody who comes your way. Donald Trump, you bet. The bondholders, you bet. Hedge funds, you bet. Whoever. That's your testimony? I just want to make sure I got it right.
Senator, throughout my career, I have adhered to the code of ethics that all lawyers are bound by.
Well, sure, but the code of ethics allow you to make money from anybody. Listen, you can choose your clients. I'm not accusing you of any ethical violations at all. I'm not. I'm just trying to figure out why you thought it was important to have these hedge funds as your clients, and if you had any moral quandaries. And your testimony is you didn't have any moral quandaries, which is fine, but I just wonder if that's the best judgment.
Senator, throughout my career, I have represented corporate clients. I have represented criminal defendants. I have represented the government. Throughout my career, I am proud that I have
Want to say anything to the people of Puerto Rico while we're here?
Please let her finish the answer. Your time has expired. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Durbin. Throughout my career, I have represented many different clients. I am proud that in every representation, I have made the best possible arguments for all of my clients.
Do you want to say anything to the people of Puerto Rico? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ritz, I'm quite confused about this ethics issue or issues, so maybe you can just help me sort it out. So I don't think I maybe understand the facts here. So you said that you've never been subject to an ethics complaint before. Is that right?
I said, to my knowledge, never been subject to an OPR complaint or any sort of formal complaint.
Okay. I'm looking at a letter from May 16th, 2010 to the Office of Professional Responsibility that reads, "This letter is a formal request that your office investigate matters pertaining to the fair dealing and, more important, honesty of Assistant United States Attorney Kevin Ritz."
If that letter exists, Senator, I was unaware of it until just now.
But you're aware of the issues surrounding the Von Rico Weber case, which is the subject of this letter asking for a formal investigation into you. You're aware of that?
As I said, I do have some recollection of that matter.
Oh, okay. So you were subject to a complaint. I have the letter right here. Let's just try to figure out what's going on in this case. I mean, this was a case involving a public defender who you got a plea agreement with, and then she asked to withdraw as counsel because she said you misrepresented the situation to her, and the court granted her motion to withdraw as counsel. That's pretty unusual, isn't it? I mean, what's happening here? She said that you told her that she relied on information about the nature of the crime, which was, she was told, was going to be a marijuana trafficking offense. And then when she got the PSR, it had a base offense level of 34 because the underlying offense was cocaine trafficking. So she had advised her client, based on your representations, here's what you're going to be likely subject to. They accepted the plea deal. She looks at the PSR, and it's something very different, she says, than what you told her. Now, this is a public defender now. And so on that basis, she had to withdraw as counsel, and the court granted her request. That's very unusual. I mean, what happened here?
Senator, first of all, I believe it was not a public defender. It was a defense attorney on the CJA panel in West Tennessee. There was a written plea agreement that was entered into. That written plea agreement, as with all of our plea agreements, includes a provision that says these are all of the promises made to this defendant by the government.
Yeah, but neither the indictment nor the change of plea transcript nor that agreement says anything about the underlying crime. It just says funds were the proceeds of distributing controlled substances without any specification of the alleged illegal narcotics. So what she says is, you sandbagged her, basically.
And that's not true. I made no such promise along those lines. It's
but
not
was
true.
there any indication before the PSR that you were going to hit this guy with the cocaine? I mean, this is unusual. It's unusual to be a Democrat administration nominate somebody who is accused of, who's hated by federal public defenders, and who's accused of sandbagging indigent defendants. So I'm baffled by this. I am totally baffled by this. So I'm trying to figure out what in the world happened. And then you got taken off this case, I think, right?
My recollection, Senator, is that the office had someone else handle it in case I needed to be a witness at a proceeding.
Well, here's what Vivian Donaldson, who is the counsel who ended up representing the United States, at Ms. Chastain's motion to withdraw as counsel, here's what she said. These allegations about you are serious. That's one of the reasons I am here, meaning in court, and Mr. Ritz will more than likely be taken off this case because of these particular allegations. So did that happen?
And I believe it was in case I needed to be a witness. But those allegations...
This is what your supervisor said in open court. I'm not quoting you now, private letter. I'm quoting you something from open court. She says you were removed from the case because of the allegations, which she says were very serious. Now, you've represented this committee. You knew nothing about all of this. You answered a question in the committee questionnaire that you weren't aware of any complaint. You weren't aware of any disciplinary committee. You weren't aware of any inquiry ever. But yet, I'm reading you a transcript from open court in which your supervising attorney says the allegations against you are very serious and you're going to be removed. So I have to tell you, I don't think I'm trying to figure out what in the world is going on here, because it doesn't sound to me like you've been very forthcoming, certainly to this committee. So what happened? Were you removed because of the allegations of improper behavior?
The allegations were false, first of all.
I'm not asking you about your view. I'm asking you about what you told the court and about what your supervising attorney told the court.
And I don't recall exactly why there may have been a change in counsel.
Mr. Ritz, don't you think don't you think that's kind of important information?
These allegations were false, and there was never a finding.
You have a clear memory of that, but you don't have a clear memory of what happened in open court and you being potentially removed by your supervising attorney. This is very bizarre, I have to say. I've never seen it quite like this. This is very, very strange. And I just noticed that we have a sudden instance of amnesia anytime we're dealing with the actual ethical complaint, but you seem to remember the case exceptionally well. So this troubles me, and it's strange. It's very, very strange. Maybe my Democrat colleagues can clear this up. I'm sure they've vetted you. This is very, very odd. So your testimony is you weren't removed, all of this was false, you were never investigated, and this what? This just all went away, or what happened?
There was certainly no court finding or any other finding by an investigative body of any unethical behavior.
I thought the court then allowed this defendant to change his guilty plea. He pled guilty, and then the court allowed him to withdraw it. That's also very unusual.
It does happen from time to time, Senator.
On the basis of your misrepresentations.
That was not the finding of the court. That